Hello everybody! Welcome to the very first tutorial I'm ever putting up on YouTube. Today we're going to start off very basic. In fact, basic meaning basics of shading. Now, this is something that a lot of people on TikTok have often requested for me. Shading, in my words, is using illusions. It is creating the essence of 3D, making depth using techniques. Techniques such as hatching, cross-hatching, stippling. We'll go over the rest of them. So, this is a lesson where you can use both digital or traditional materials. The techniques themselves really transfer over from one modem of creation to the other. So let's start. First, I'm going to draw a sphere. Now, I'm not going to use my fancy tools so that you guys at home don't feel left out. Because, I mean, technically I could go like, and then bloop, and then zip, and then, and it would make a perfect circle. But I'd rather just keep it organic for everybody. So here we have a circle. The first technique I want to go over is hatching. Now, hatching is very basic. It's literally just lines, up and down, side to side, whatever direction you want to go in. Now, when you guys were younger or in art class or anything like that, you might have had a practice, an exercise to do, where you would draw a circle and then you get a light source. Now, this thing here, whenever I create a light source, it will look like this. And it's just a little bitty lamp, and the light direction will go down like that, or if it's coming towards you, I'll draw it in perspective like that, so now you know it's coming here. Or if it's going away in perspective, it'll look something like that, and going that way. This is important, specifically because I want you guys to know what direction the light sources are taking. This will come into use a lot later into the lesson, but for now, let me get a better eraser, holy crap. But for now, our light source is just going to be straight on from the side, like that. But anyhow, so your art teacher or whatever, or even under your own curiosity, you might have worked on lighting. So now, the first thing we're starting off with is a sphere, because it's a very simple, easy thing to light. Our main light is going to be hitting right about there. Just bing, like that. Which means that our darkest area is going to be down there. And then you're going to have gradation getting lighter and lighter as we go up. I'm going to do a lazy bit of shading here that I like calling Miranda shading. It's essentially finding the fastest way to get the best result, which is basically scribbles. Scribbles and using the side. So each iteration of a shading we're going to learn will look something like this, but through a different technique. And that first technique we're doing is the hatching that I talked about before. So with hatching, yes, we're going to have our little light source right here, and our highlight's going to be right around there. Now with hatching, it's just a bunch of straight lines. So start off with your darkest area right here. Now you can grab a piece of sketch paper, you can grab your tablet, you can grab crayons, markers, pens, it doesn't really matter. Just make sure to follow along or see what I'm doing here with my hands. See what's happening on the screen itself. So I'm putting in my darkest area right there. With hatching, the way you make things darker is by decreasing the amount of space between the lines, like that. If you want it really, really light, very, very thin lines, very, very far spaced, like that. For instance, over here, I can make it look like the light is coming in this direction, just by adding extra lines right in there. See? We essentially created that shape, especially if you blur your eyes. I could take this to an extreme and make a hole coming down the middle, kind of like this, by just adding that. See? Now we have that hole coming right down the middle there, just by increasing the amount of lines and leaving a space in between. That is, in essence, how you get the lighting of hatching to work. So that's what we're going to continue doing on this sphere. Just up and down, up and down. Now see, I'm using lighter lines that are further spaced apart. Just like that. Lighter, lighter, lighter. Now remember, a little bit around that top edge, because if you wanted the light source to be right on top like this, it would have to be hitting directly downwards, and that's when you'd see a shading that looks a little bit more like that, and that's when your light source would be directly on top. But that's not what we're doing right now. Right now, it's hitting kind of at an angle, kind of from, if you had a light in your hand shining down onto a ball in front of you, just like that. And so remember, right over here in this area of the sphere, there's a slight reflection, and make sure to keep that reflection there. That reflection is from your ground plane. So what happens is you have the light coming down, it's hitting, you get more and more shadow coming down from this angle, and then of course there's a shadow down here. But the fact of the matter is, where there's no shadow, you know, in this area here, which means the light from this area is bouncing back onto the ball. And this happens with real life too. If you look at your arms or any object around you, you're going to see this reflection of light hitting on objects. It's not just a straight shadow moving downwards. There's always a little bit on the other side, unless you're in outer space, because shadows in outer space work in a very strange manner. Anyhow, so this is hatching when it comes to this particular shape, this particular sphere. So that's number one. Number two is cross-hatching. So we have that. New circle. Now, there are several different ways I've seen people use cross-hatching. I personally like going just a bit crazy and moving it all over the place like this. Some people will use a technique a bit more like that and make it look very fancy. You know where you can see a lot of hatching and cross-hatching? On the money of different countries. You can, yeah, if you look at the way they design their money, you'll notice those tiny little lines everywhere on the portraits. And that is a very good example of not directly cross-hatching, but something I like calling contour hatching, which I'll show you how to do in a moment. But for now, let's just work on this. So we have a little light source up here. We have everything moving darker as it goes down and down and down and down and down. And just moving around, moving around. Just a little bit by a little bit. Now, if you guys want, since I'm on TikTok at Miranda the Hybrid, I'd love to see you use these techniques. Not necessarily in this giant long video, but something very similar to this. I want to see how you guys learn and apply, because I know a lot of my audience is younger artists, and I'd love to be able to help you guys. Because shading techniques, a lot of people will go like this, and then they'll smudge it. That's a very common first way. But frankly, learning the techniques, for proper shading, because there's so many of them, is a very good idea. It empowers you and it gives you knowledge. Knowledge is power, and with that power you can make greater art. And with that greater art we can take over the bourgeoisie. So, in essence, learn how to shade and we're going to rule the world. That there is cross-hatching. The third one I want to go over is stippling. And stippling is evil. I really dislike it. I know there's some artists on TikTok who do beautiful stippling work, and I bow to you because you have patience that I do not. That is not how we spell stippling. That is how we spell stippling. Now, stippling is just dots, which is why I hate it so much, because I have no patience whatsoever. But, you know, we're gonna do it. So let us do many itty bitty witty bitty dots. Everywhere. And yes, light source is up here. And essentially, kind of like with the hatching lines, the further away you got, the lighter the tone was. Same thing with the stippling. Very close little dots together make a darker tone. Further apart dots make a lighter tone. And that's just how we're gonna do this. Lots and lots and lots and lots and lots of dots. In fact, let me cut so that you guys don't have to see this entire process. Okay, here we go. That is stippling. So we have 3 different techniques, and frankly, I happen to like the cross-hatching the most. I have a lot of love for cross-hatching. But so here are the 3 techniques so far, and see, they all create a spherical shape. We are using our powers of artistry to make magic that makes a 2D object look like a 3D object. And this is exactly what art's about. Well, it's one of the many things. Art is so many different things. So we have hatching, cross-hatching, and stippling. So another one I want to go over is scribbling. Actually, let's do 2 more. Scribbling and smudging. Let's make a new layer. So scribbling is just what it sounds like. It's a lot of fun. So here we go again with our sphere, our light source, our highlight. Scribbling is just it's literally just anything you want it to be. It's really fun. I've seen other artists use this style and I appreciate it a lot. Some people take it in the form of teeny little circles. Some people do like little X's or something like that, which is almost like hatching, but you know, whatever works. There's actually an artist on TikTok I saw who who made an entire picture of Snoop Dogg and shaded it with the letters Snoop Dogg. And it looked extremely good and it actually worked out very well. And I loved what they did. It was great. They did a good job on it, and I adored it. Okay, so that's kind of like what scribbling does. There's actually another one I want to add after smudging. Actually, let's do it before smudging. Okay, so that's scribbling. Yeah, fun. Scribbling. Okay, so this one's important. This one will be important for anybody who wants to learn how to shade and is applying it to bodies or foreshortening, for instance. So here's the thing. If you're going to draw a cylinder in perspective, oh, come on, that's eraser. There's a circle, and bam, you got a cylinder. But to anybody else, it might not understand what you're trying to draw here. So what you do is you draw contour lines around it to show exactly what it is, like that. Suddenly, it's a lot more understandable that this is a cylinder in perspective, especially when you add the shading. Suddenly, bam, cylinder in perspective. Same thing, if you draw a cylinder from the side, this is the exact same shape, it's just from the side. Put in those same lines, and then put in your lines of perspective or latitude, whatever you want to call them, right there. And suddenly, bam, you can tell that that is something that might be spherical from the side, especially in reference to the picture you've drawn before. These are contour lines. These wrap around the figure itself, and I'm going to be doing another tutorial specifically on contour lines, so don't worry about that, we'll go over it later. The thing is that you can apply this to a sphere. You know, back in school they would have like a globe, kind of like that, and you know, it would have its lines of latitude and longitude and stuff, and it looked, you know, the lines would kind of curve out to the side, but that's how you could tell that it was a sphere without even having the shading. It's like you had these crazy lines all over it. You can do the same thing with your shading, and actually, it's called contour shading. Let me write that down for you. And it's extremely, extremely useful if you're trying to accentuate the shape of an object, especially in perspective. For instance, those really annoying angles where you have somebody's hand reaching out at you like that, and their forearm is here and the rest of their arm is like right there, and they're over here and they're really angry at you. Actually, what angle would that be? Oh, hand, whatever. But so if you shade with a circular motion right there, like that, it suddenly pushes that hand out in perspective, and it's very useful. Here, I'm gonna show it to you, and I'm gonna show it to you in a little bit easier way to understand. So we have our light source like we did before, our highlight. Now remember this globe here? We're going to use those lines of shading. Curve it up against the ball itself. And now more to the side and more to the side. And suddenly you have really, really accentuated the shape of your sphere just by shading with the lines that would run along its surface. It looks a lot more circular than any of the other ones we've done before. In the same scope, you can also shade side to side like that and pull those lines upward on either side. Just pull them side, side, side like this. We're going to be doing an entire human body with this kind of shading, and I'll show you how effective it can be. But now that you have these lines curving around, pulling to your light source and moving along the surface of the sphere, suddenly the sphere seems a lot more spherical. And that is contour shading, and it is magical! Okay, the last one I want to go over is smudging. Now frankly, we can use this. All you want to do is use whatever technique you want to shade. And also, if you guys have a physical pencil, I'm using an Apple Pencil right now on an iPad Pro, but if you turn your pencil to the side, it's going to get a lot more gritty, like this. You're going to have a wider space to shade with. That's very useful, because you can do that and get more surface area covered faster, and vary your pressure of whatever tool you're using. And of course, pressing harder will go darker, pressing lighter will get lighter. Easy, easy. So take your finger, or your smudge brush, or whatever you're using. There's so many different ways to smudge. I personally like using my fingers. And just go in there, get in there, and smudge. Now, pull from side to side. You never want to pull straight downwards, because then you're going to be pulling this tone over here down into another tone. You want to shade along the edges of your object. And then we're going to push it a little bit further in a moment, and you'll see how and why. So keep going around and around and around until you get your shades all moved into one kind of area. Now this is the first step. It's a lot sloppier doing it digitally. I'll have to do a traditional version of this. So now move back to your drawing implement and reinforce your dark areas a little bit. Just pop them back in there. Just a little bit. Make sure to keep your highlight on the edge. Just a little bit, little bit, little bit, little bit, little bit. Go back to your smudge brush. What am I using? Ooh, that's why it's not going well. I'm supposed to be using acrylic, or I'm gonna use jagged brush. But yeah. Ah, so much better. Okay. So yeah, you're gonna just gently move around, pull your tones from side to side. Now, for those of you who are using graphite, if you took away your highlight, all you had to do is grab your eraser and put it right back in there. Just a little bit and move it outwards gently. And that is smudge shading. Now these are obviously sloppy and done in a few seconds, but there is something you can do to help yourself learn these particular techniques even more. Let's go over to the tone practice. And those of you who went to art school or, had high school or even, junior high art classes, you're probably going to recognize something like this. Essentially, you're using your knowledge of how to shade to make a tone chart. Now, obviously, for stippling, you guys can see that I was using the pens and brushes I had here because I am an impatient little crackhead. But if you have the time and you have the interest, try doing this. Get yourself a piece of paper, line it, create the graphs just like this, and practice. Practice which ones you like. Obviously, we can't do contour on here because, well, contour refers to more circular objects. But this is a good first step to practicing. Get your hand used to it. The most powerful thing I've ever done for my art career was train my hands and train myself in how to use different techniques. It doesn't matter if it's digital, traditional, watercolor, paint, or even guitar. You have to be able to know how to use your tools and techniques to get the desired effect. So if you guys have extra time in our lovely little quarantine we're having worldwide, try doing something like this. And hang in for part 2. It's going to come soon. And thank you for listening.